You're listening to The Head Trash Show with the founder of Head Trash, Alexia Leachman. Head Trash is the home to the new and unique Head Trash clearance method that removes unwanted negative thoughts, feelings and emotions quickly and effectively so that you can achieve clarity, confidence and contentment in your life. Tune in every week as Alexia shares insights and simple strategies to help you create some headspace to experience confidence and clarity in your life and business. To find out how to clear your head trash quickly and effectively using our unique method, pop over to www.headtrash.co.uk to get our free download and subscribe for our free head trash clearance updates. And now for the show.
Hello and welcome back to the Head Trash Show. This is me, your host, Alexia Leachman. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, on today's show, I'm going to talk about how you can lose weight with your mind. Now, obviously, I'm a little bit mind obsessed. So as far as I'm concerned, we can pretty much do anything by starting with our mind and how we approach it with our mind. But I am not alone. There's a psychologist called Eric Robinson, and he's got a surprising tool for weight loss. So let me give you a clue. We all have one, but we don't use it as much as we could, and we're always losing it. No, it's not your mobile phone, it's your memory. Now, I first came across this guy, Robinson, in a BBC article, which I'll share on the show notes. And basically the article was all about how you can curb hunger pangs with your mind. And obviously I was quite interested, and it was quite an interesting article. So to save you from having to check it out, here's basically what the article was saying. So this Robinson guy, he stumbled across the idea of using the mind when he noticed that people with terrible memories would have absolutely no recollection of any of the food they'd eaten 20 minutes ago. It was people with a disorder called anterograde amnesia. I think I've said that right. And he basically then went on to do a study where he gave two men that had this disorder a plate of sandwiches and some cake, and he asked them to eat it until they were full. And then 15 minutes later, he gave them another plate, and the two amnesiacs just tucked in all over again. And they'd forgotten that they'd already eaten only 15-20 minutes ago. So isn't that weird and interesting? You'd think that our bodies would know if we'd eaten or not, and whether we were actually hungry. But apparently not. In fact, our body and our brain can be easily fooled. So as you can imagine, this is where I was getting really interested in this article. And then it goes on to share a really great study that kind of proves it. There's another researcher called Jeff Brunstrom at the University of Bristol, and he asked his study participants to eat a bowl of soup. Now that sounds pretty simple, right? But unbeknownst to them, he had rigged the soup bowl, and what he did was he hooked up a pipe to the bowl through the table, which meant that he could top up their soup without them noticing. He's a bit cheeky, isn't he? And what he found was super interesting. He found that however much they snacked later depended on how much soup appeared in the bowl at the beginning of their eating session. So whether or not they had a big bowl of soup or a small bowl, and not how much they actually ate. So yeah, he was basically sort of filling up the bowl of soup while they were eating, and they'd carry on eating. So it wasn't the quantity of soup that they'd eaten, but how much appeared in the bowl to start with. So this is kind of getting really interesting now, isn't it? So basically, if you think that your hunger pangs are completely controlled by your body, then think again. The mind has got a much bigger role in hunger than we thought. Now, this guy, Jeff Brunstrom, did another study, and this time he asked people to eat with one hand while they played solitaire with the other. And what he found was this: because they were distracted, they struggled to remember the meal that they'd had, and so they pigged out on way more biscuits later in the day. So again, this idea of distraction. And so this now starts getting very near the idea of mindful eating. And this is something that I've talked about already on another podcast. When I did it with the guys from Changeability, we talked a lot about mindful eating. So this is nothing new. So what is it? Mindful eating is basically being present and focused on the food that you're eating. So, not just sort of being still with it, but noticing the colours, the taste, the sensation of the food as you chew it in your mouth and you feel it on your tongue, and the smell of it and how it feels going down your throat. All that stuff, you've really got to just take it all in. And in fact, he did a study, this Brunstrom guy, and he asked some obese women to eat a plate of sandwiches mindfully. I think they were ham sandwiches, which not sure how much of a difference that makes. But he asked them to eat the sandwiches mindfully. And what he noticed was this: when it came to snacking 3 hours later, the mindful eating group ate 30% fewer calories. Now, this is pretty staggering, isn't it? 30% fewer calories. Imagine if you wanted to lose weight and you wanted to cut down on your calorie intake by 30%. You could be doing that by just simply mindfully eating. Now, isn't that amazing? But wait, there is more. This mind stuff, when it comes to food, is really, really interesting. There's another group of researchers, and they have found that simply visualising your cravings can trick the mind that it's actually eaten. Now, isn't this brilliant? Now, visualising is nothing new. We know already that visualising is really, really powerful technique, because the mind can't actually tell the difference between something imagined and something real. And it's this that makes it so powerful when it comes to, for people like athletes, for example, that visualise being successful, that visualise seeing their body moving in that way, succeeding in the way they need their body to do. And even I use visualisation a lot to prepare me for my own childbirth experiences. So visualisation is a really, really powerful technique with science to back it up. So we shouldn't really be too surprised that we can apply this thinking and technique to food and hunger. But who would have imagined that it would have worked? Because most of us think that hunger pangs are controlled by our body. But they're not, are they? They're controlled by the mind. So if you had to choose, right, between mindful eating and visualization, which would you choose? Now, I know which one I would do. I'd certainly be going for the eating one. So if you did want to go for the eating route, then how can we become more mindful when it comes to eating? Well, you might be interested to know that there are some core principles when it comes to mindful eating. Yes, did you know there are core principles to eating? Now, I found this when I was researching this. I found it absolutely fascinating. There's a lady called Michelle May, and she's written a book called Eat What You Love, Love What You Eat. And she shares this mindful eating cycle, which is basically a series of questions designed to create a gap between your I want food now trigger and your response, which is eating. And essentially you want to create that gap. And that's what being mindful is about. It's not just responding. It's the same with our emotions. We can have a little bit of space and think that through before kicking in our response. So the same goes for eating. And so she's come up with this mindful eating cycle. And so basically these questions go like this. So the cycle pretty much starts with this question, which is, why do I eat? And the reason it starts there is because it's really a great place to start if you want to start changing your behaviour. So why are you eating? So this might include sort of triggers like maybe it's physical hunger, maybe you really are hungry, but maybe you're in a challenging situation, or maybe you're stressed, or you're tired, or maybe you're just bored. Why are you eating in that moment? And just trying to understand that can really try and reveal quite a bit about your eating habits. And then there's, when do I want to eat? So this answer might be more about the clock or some physical hunger cues, but there might be some emotional stuff in there too. Now, the next question is, what do I eat? And so this really helps you to take a closer look at some of the factors you consider when choosing food. So is it convenience? Is it taste? Is it comfort? Is it nutrition? What kind of decision making are you bringing to your choice when it comes to your food? So again, most people just sort of blindly pick food that they're going to eat. But if you just stop a moment, be more mindful about it and think about, hang on a minute, what am I eating? And what am I choosing to eat? And what's the decision making going on when I choose my food? And the next one is this: how do I eat? And I don't mean with cutlery. No, like, which are you when you eat? Are you rushed? Are you mindful? Are you distracted? Are you secretive? Are you on the run? The thing is, we're with our iPads and our phones, it's not unheard of for people to be on the phone in one hand, wolfing a sandwich down another, while charging down the street, running for the next bus or going to another meeting. And so this isn't unheard of, the fact that we're always on the go, we can never switch off. Most people don't have a lunch break. So again, just looking at how you eat can be really eye-opening. Making time for your lunch and then eating mindfully could make all the difference in terms of how much you end up eating in the middle of the afternoon. You might not need to eat in the middle of the afternoon if you could only remember what you had for your lunch. And then there's how much do I eat? So this idea of quantity can be interesting. And again, it might be decided by things like how physically full you are, or the pack size, or whatever serving size that you've ordered, but also whether somebody else is serving your food. I know that in an old relationship I was in, and my other half, who used to, do loads of training and running and all this kind of stuff and landscape gardening stuff in the day. He needed a big appetite to make up for that. And I was in an office job, and yet when he'd serve up dinner, I get same portions as he did. And it's like, hang on a minute, stop giving me all this food. I don't need as much as you. So even just thinking about who is serving the food onto your plate can make a big difference. And then finally, thinking about this question, where does the energy go? So what do I mean by that? Well, eating for you might make you invigorated and it might energize you. Or maybe it's making you feel sluggish. Notice how you feel once you've eaten. It will have a lot to do with what you've eaten, I suspect, but it's worth taking a moment of your attention to give that some thought. Now, you might also notice that the energy of your food leads to feelings like maybe guilt or shame. Some of that energetic stuff can start feeding some of your emotions that you really don't want. So think about how you're using the energy from your food during work or play. It might be that you're eating a lot of food and yet you end up just sitting about quite a lot and you feel quite sluggish, and this energy that you're taking in is just not getting used. So you know what? Maybe you need to lower the energy that you're putting in your body, or change the form of it so it does energize you more rather than make you feel sluggish. So you see, these questions on this mindful eating cycle are kind of interesting when you take a little bit of a closer look at what they are. Now, I'm going to share a graphic from this mindful eating cycle on the podcast show notes for today's podcast, so you can have a look at it. I'm a visual person, so I like diagrams. So if you're visual too, then I'm sure that you will like this diagram. And I'm also going to link to an article that I've come across that's got loads more information on this mindful eating stuff that's really, really interesting. And in fact, it's got loads and loads of studies, because there is, believe it or not, a ton of research into mindful eating. And there's an approach that's been called the Mindful-Based Eating Awareness Program, or Eating Awareness Training, called MB-EAT. And there's so much research done into it. And it all says that it works, particularly with binge eating disorders. And in one study, they showed that the number of binge eating episodes among participants went from slightly over 4 per week to about 1.5. And that's just from mindful eating. And in fact, by the end of that study, a lot of the patients taking part no longer met the diagnostic criteria for the disorder. So they no longer had the binge eating disorder. So, this is kind of quite amazing for something that's actually so simple, just taking the time to slow down and focus on your food. So, if you want to tap into the power of your mind to lose weight, here is a little rundown of the exercises that I've come across that will be really useful to help you on your journey to losing some weight. So the first one is this. Have a hunger scale. This sounds a bit mad, but I think it's a really good idea. Now, if you listen to this podcast, you'll be familiar with me asking you to rate stuff out of 10. Well, we need to do this with your hunger as well. So first of all, think about, what does naught feel like for you physically when you're really, really hungry, like really hungry. And maybe it's headaches, irritation, shakiness, fatigue, all that kind of stuff. But just have an idea in your mind what a naught feels like. And then at the other end of the scale, think about what a 10 feels like. This is when you're so full you can't move. You might feel nauseous, bloated, fatigued, swollen. And maybe you're feeling guilty and, shameful and, all that stuff as well. Really think about what that 10 feels like. And then, now you've got this scale of hunger. So then when you get to a hungry point, when you're hungry, you can just rate yourself on your hunger scale out of 10 and notice where you are, notice what's happening in your body, notice what's happening in your mind that's made you choose that number. And just keep a journal, make a note, add a little note on your phone, just so you can sort of see what you're feeling, what your experiences are around being hungry. And if you do that, let's say for 3 or 4 days, then what you could also do is note any triggers or physical cues that were happening in your life around that time that have led you to make that choice when it came to rating your hunger. And you might start noticing some things that are making you more hungry. Maybe there is a particular situation that happens in your life that you tend to respond to it by going for some food. And that will start to help you to start uncovering the reasons or the things that are driving you to eating in a way that's not entirely healthy for you. So now that you're armed with your hunger scale, every time you get hungry, you can rate your hunger. So imagine now you're hungry, you get a hunger pang. So first of all, rate your hunger. And the next thing is ask yourself this: why do I want some food? And if your hunger rating is high, then maybe you actually are hungry. But maybe you're doing it for another reason. So think about what they might be. Maybe there's a social trigger. And so, for example, there are people all around you that are going to get some food or eating. Maybe there's a break at work and they're all stopping and they're going down to the canteen for a quick afternoon cake. Then you can still join them, but do you really need to have a cake when you go with them? Maybe there's an option for you not to take part in the cake eating. And so think about whether or not eating is the only option at that moment in order to maintain the other needs that you have going on at the same time, maybe the social needs. Or maybe there's an emotional feeling that you're trying to mask. So, for example, you're feeling a bit rubbish, you're feeling a bit lonely, you're feeling a bit under the weather, and you feel, I'll feel much better if I eat cake, chocolate, whatever it is. So if there is a feeling that is causing you to want to reach for the food, then take a closer look at that feeling and then try and work with that using, you know what I'm going to say next, don't you? The 5-step process for clearing head trash. Absolutely. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast before, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you're not, then let me just enlighten you. The 5-step process for clearing head trash is a free 5-step process you can get from our website at headtrash.co.uk. And it enables you to clear your negative thoughts, feelings and emotions really quickly in 5 steps. And you can pretty much do stuff maybe in 10, 15 minutes or so. So this is useful because if you have these emotional feelings that are constantly triggering you to reach for food, then it's worth taking the time to clear these emotions and get them out of your life, because this is what's causing you to overeat. So it's worth taking the time to look at the emotional side of stuff. If you want to get hold of the 5-step process, you can get it free from the website. And I'll also have a link in the podcast show notes. Now, so if you've eradicated any of the triggers that might be going on, and if you've gone through the other mindful eating questions that I've mentioned before, that are part of that mindful eating cycle, and you finally decide that, yes, you really are hungry, then you do this. You drink half a pint of water and you wait. Because hunger is often dehydration in disguise. And it might be that you just weren't hungry at all, you were just thirsty. We often misread the dehydration sign for hunger and we reach for food when actually we need to drink water. Water is often the best thing to turn to if you get a headache or if you're hungry. Just drink water, and if you're still feeling bad after 15-20 minutes, then your original feeling was correct. So if after your glass of water you're still hungry, you now have 2 options. The first option is eat, but when you do, you need to eat mindfully. So how do you eat mindfully? Well, for example, this is how you might do that. Take the food that you're going to eat. So because you're trying to be healthy, I'm thinking it's probably maybe a piece of fruit. But maybe if you're going to be doing it with a piece of chocolate, then sure, eat a piece of chocolate mindfully too. And then just take a moment to observe the appearance of the food, the texture of it, give it a good smell. What's the aroma? What kind of changes are you noticing in your body as you look at the food and observe it and take it all in? So maybe you're starting to salivate, maybe you're getting impatient and you really want to eat it and there's anticipation. Or maybe there's nothing, you just see it as a bit of functional food, you need some energy and you're just going to eat it. Maybe there's absolutely nothing at all. So just again, take a moment to take all that in. And then just take a small amount of the food and put it in your mouth. And don't chew it. Just leave it there. And after 30 seconds, or it's a minute for chocolate apparently, but after 30 seconds, then you can start chewing. And then chew nice and slowly feel the food in your mouth. Notice how it feels. And then swallow it slowly as well. And then after you've finished eating, then ask yourself these questions. What did you notice about the flavour or the texture before you started the food? And what about once you started it? And then how does that compare to how you normally eat? This is where we start to really take in the pleasures of food. Now, I mentioned there were 2 options, didn't I? And obviously option 1 was eat. So what is the second option, do you think? Well, the second option is this: not eat, but instead visualise eating your food. So instead of eating when you're hungry, this time you need to just visualise eating your favourite food, or the food that you want, the food that you're craving. So maybe you could use this as a prompt to do almost like a mini food meditation. And so for 5 minutes, you just want to sit quietly and visualise everything about that eating experience. Some of the questions I've already talked about that we were looking at when we came to eating food mindfully, you can ask yourself those same questions, but this time just do it all in your mind. So take that piece of food that you can eat slowly, whether it's a piece of fruit or a piece of chocolate, and just imagine holding it in your hand and looking at it, taking in the colour, taking in the smell, move it around, break a little piece off, put it in your mouth, hold it there in your mouth for a bit and just notice how that feels in your mouth and how you're feeling as you start to want to eat it. And then as you do eat it, notice how that makes you feel as you are eating it. And just really immerse yourself in this imaginary food experience. And then you've finished. You've done. Eat it, wipe your mouth, and go back to what you were doing. And you've just managed to visualise eating some food. And try this for a while and see how that works for you. Remember, some of this stuff has really shown, well, in fact, all of it has shown incredible results in research studies. So there's absolutely no reason why this stuff can't work for you. But the only thing that you're going to need to want to do is you're going to need to actually want to do this and be committed to it, because it will take effort. But as with anything in life, you are worth this effort, because once you manage to crack this, you will feel so brilliant about yourself and you will be able to maintain that momentum to carry on having a healthy lifestyle, because it only takes something at the beginning to get you going on this journey. Once you start noticing some success, it's much easier to maintain. So I hope that today's podcast has been useful in helping you to lose weight with your mind. And if you do try any of the stuff that I've shared with you today, then please let me know how you've got on. I would love to hear your success stories, or some of the challenges that you're noticing. What's happening in your life as you try to do this? Do people think you're completely mad when you're sitting there in quiet at the dinner table, imagining eating your food and not touching anything? Let me know how you get on. I would love to hear it. Just get in touch, hello@headtrash.co.uk, or you can find us on the Facebook page. Until next time, bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in. You've just been listening to Alexia Leachman here on The Head Trash Show. If you enjoyed the show, she'd really appreciate you leaving a review on iTunes. And don't forget to pop over to www.headtrash.co.uk to get your copy of the free 5 Steps to Clearing Head Trash guide. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes for more strategies, tips and how-tos for clearing your head trash and reclaiming your headspace. Until next time.